Alright, hello once again. Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. I've been doing a series of video presentations I've created based on the PowerPoint slides for Murox HTML5 CSS3 4th edition and Murox JavaScript in jQuery 2nd edition. These two books are used both for the Rankin Technical College AWD, that's Application in Web Development, 1000 Web Development Technologies course. So far I've gone through everything, all 20 chapters were the PowerPoints, in the Murox HTML5 and CSS3 4th edition book, and I'm in the Murox JavaScript and jQuery 3rd edition book. And in here I've done all 7 chapters in section 1, all 6 chapters in section 3, and the first 3 chapters in section 2. So now it's time to go into how to use jQuery plugins and jQuery Ui widgets. All right. So here's our objectives: to use plugins and widgets in an application, describe what a jQuery plugin is, describe how you find and use a plugin, talk about how to use some built-in plugins, describe what a widget is, describe the 3 files that a widget or the UI user interface requires, and explain how to include them in a web page, describe the process of finding and using a jQuery UI widget, and talk about some of the built-in widgets such as accordion tab, dialog button, and date picker. All right, as it says here, if I do a Google search for a jQuery plugin, you've seen this already. All right. So if I put in a specific plugin, it'll find it. But the key takeaway, in my opinion, right there is it's under plugins.jquery.com. All right. That's probably the #1 site to go to look for a plugin. That doesn't mean there aren't other sites, and you can see some of them right here. The thing about the plugin registry is you know that there are going to be plugins out there that have been downloaded millions of times. The reason that that's important is that that means that millions of people have used them and have tested them. And I don't mean to at all talk badly about jQuery-plugins.net or code.google.com or GitHub, of course, or SourceForge. All right, because there's just tons of these places. Here's some popular plugins. These are ones for images. Here's ones for slideshows. Some of these are going to be discussed in this chapter. So here's the steps for using a plugin. #1, study the documentation for the plugin. In other words, determine whether or not the plugin is going to meet your needs. Before you go out and say, I'm going to write my own plugin, which you can very well do, you should check to make sure there isn't one already out there. As the old saying goes, you don't want to reinvent the wheel. #2, get the URLs for the plugin files if they're available via a CDN, or download the files and save them to your website. #3, in the head element, code the links to the CSS file, or typically files that are required. Same thing with any JavaScript files that are required. #4, if the download for the plugin contains an images folder, make sure the folder is there and make sure that it has whatever CSS and JavaScript files are needed for the plugin. #5, code the HTML and CSS for the page so that it is appropriate, in other words, so that it'll use the plugin in the right way. #6, if necessary, write any jQuery, any ancillary jQuery code that uses the method and options of the plugin. There's 2 cautions here when using plugins. #1, make sure you include a script element for jQuery, and make sure you put it and position it above whatever JavaScript files you need for the actual plugin itself. #2, some plugins won't work with the latest version of jQuery. So if you have problems with a plugin, check that plugin's documentation to see if it requires a certain version of jQuery. Again, make sure you have jQuery in there, and you add the reference to that before you add the reference to the plugin. This is the BX slider. I'm not going to run through it. It is a Lightbox plugin, which you probably have seen before. Typically, a lot of times with a Lightbox, what it'll do is it'll show you a thumbnail, and if you click it, it becomes bigger, a bigger image. Here's taking that a plugin for a carousel. Carousels are big. Eventually, I hope to have some kind of a carousel, also sometimes referred to as a slideshow, on the main page of the website that we're going to be developing. Again, it's not my intention here to be going through code. I'm going through the PowerPoints in here. So I apologize if it seems to anyone, it's like, well, why aren't you talking about this? Why aren't you talking about this? The time for doing that is in the classroom. So as I'm going through something, if the students don't understand it, they're able to ask questions. All right, it's kind of hard right here because I don't have an audience. Here's the Jquery Ui website. I've shown you this already. There's about 30 different tools over here that you can use, and when you select one, they come up in the box right here. All right, and you'll notice the Jquery Ui is another download, and you can customize it to only download what you want. As mentioned, there's 4 types. There's interactions, there's widgets, there's themes, and there's effects. All right. If you pull in just one or a group of them, you're going to get something like this. Now, if you look right here, I just want to make sure you see this. You'll notice these files that are right here, that's just 2 files. This is the UI CSS file. Here's the UI CSS file that's been minified. Here is the UI JS file. Here is the UI.js file that's been minified. Now, typically, I'm speaking from my own personal experience, but you don't need both the non-minified and the minified one. In fact, typically, you're only going to want the minified for 2 reasons. Number 1, it's shorter, smaller. Number 2, you're not able to do anything with it, and you shouldn't want to do anything with files that other people have already created for you to use in conjunction with something you're doing anyway. All right, this is how to build a Jquery Ui download. Click the download link. Unless you want to download everything, you'll click the custom download button right there. Select or deselect anything you want or don't want. Select the theme. Use the drop-down list. You can also build a custom theme from clicking on the link above the list. All right, and I know that's in here someplace. And the thing is, what a lot of people like to do is they do like to build their own custom theme because they don't want it to look like something somebody else did. They might want to put their own company's colors in, etc. Then click the download button to download a zipped folder that contains the Jquery Ui files. It'll be something like this. Here's the accordion. We looked at that earlier, so I'm not even going to talk about it. All right. How to use the Jquery Ui documentation. I've shown you this. In the left sidebar, click on the widget you'd like. In the right sidebar, click on the example name to see a working example. Check the API documentation to display additional information. Here is an example of how you would typically use a widget. You put it under your document.ready, and we really haven't talked about that, but that is where typically you will put most of your jQuery code. Document.ready is different than onload. Typically onload, the stuff that you put in a Windows onload function, to my knowledge at least, does not run until everything has been loaded into memory. Until everything has been loaded into memory, including images. All right, but document ready isn't like that. You don't even need the images. You can just start working on it. So there's the accordion, the HTML. There's a tab. The idea, that's the one that's active. If you click here, the code that's in here will change, etc. Here's a button. Okay, so you can bring up a dialog box like this and then click there to close it. Date picker. Again, As mentioned, not my intention to be going over all of these. There's an exercise in the book that they have you modify a carousel app, replace tabs with an accordion, use widgets in a form. Okay? All right. So that's it. We have polished off another chapter. When I come back, it'll be time for Chapter 12.